What if I told you that there's a marina in Lake Erie where you can sleep in a tiny home that's literally floating on the water, where your bed is 5 feet above the lake and there's a massive picture window staring straight into the sunrise? Now zoom out a little and you'll see that it's not just one tiny home, but a village of floating tiny homes. This is Solstay, and the guy who built it is 29 years old. His name is Joe Lisa, and in November of 2022, he bought this dilapidated marina that Solstay now sits on. 3 years later, and he's transformed it into a property projecting just over $1 million in revenue in 2026, and based on its income, could be worth $7.25 million. Oh man, that is crazy, my friend. You know what's even crazier than that? He built the first 10 units for $10,000 each on pontoon boats he bought off of Facebook Marketplace. Before the marina, before any of this, Joe was living in a decommissioned ambulance near the University of Michigan that he bought off of a government auction website for $3,500, eating tuna packets and painting houses to survive. And every single mistake that he made on the way to Solstay, and there were many, turned out to be exactly the lesson that he needed for the next thing. And by the way, if you're new here, my name is Rob Abasolo, and on this channel, we break down exactly how real investors are building real wealth through short-term rentals and creative real estate. And today, we're breaking down the Solstay Tiny Home Boat Village, which I gotta admit, does make me just like a little jealous. And I think by the end of the video, you're gonna be too. So let's get into it. Solstay sits on the southern shore of Lake Erie in Sandusky, Ohio. And when you pull up for the first time, it doesn't look like much from the outside. It used to be a working marina. All steel docks and industrial buildings, the kind of place that you'd drive past without a second thought. But once you're through the gate and walking down the boardwalk, the whole thing shifts. The floating cottages sit in a row along the docks, each one in its own self-contained world. They're 25 by 8 feet, so not big, but every inch is intentional. You've got a kitchenette, a living area, and then right at the head of the bed, a picture window that puts you face to face with the lake. There's also a rooftop hot tub on one of the converted buildings, an 80-foot boardwalk connecting everything, a convenience store, a boat ramp. Across the water, you can see $1.5 to $2.5 million homes on the shoreline, and if you can believe it, Lake Erie pulls in 13 million visitors through the Sandusky area every single year.
There's 13 million people coming. So these hotels never really had to reinvest into being better. And so we're like, hey, this is an area where like if we are better and we are nice, we are clean, we are unique, we can really stand out quickly.
Nobody was offering anything better, so nobody had to try. And Joe saw this as an opportunity.
There's nothing else that's in like the unique stay space in the Sandusky area. There's nothing else floating on water in the Sandusky area.
30 units heading into the 2026 season, and a wait list of guests who come back every single year because there's genuinely nothing else like it in the region. When Joe bought this marina in 2022, it was only generating $20,000 a year in revenue. He paid $1 million for it and put in another $300,000 for improvements. So right out the gate, he was in this thing for $1.3 million total. But before he went all out on premium units, Joe did something smart. He didn't just start building the most expensive version of his vision, he tested it first. The first 10 houseboats he built cost around $10,000 each. He literally had his crew driving all around town, meeting up with people from Facebook Marketplace, buying old decommissioned pontoon boats for $500 to $1,000 a piece, stripping them down, laying new deck on top, and then building a 110 square foot cottage right on top of that. And these were bare bones, okay? No bathrooms in the units, just a modular restroom trailer right outside of the dock that Joe had a graffiti artist transform into something that looked like a log cabin, complete with a goose sticking its head out of the corner.
We get comments on our bathrooms all the time being like way above what people expected.
Oh my gosh. Just a ghost. It's just a ghost. And if you can believe it, these $10,000 bare-bone builds with a graffiti-painted modular bathroom trailer on Lake Erie were getting 5-star reviews, which is why I love this business. And between those 10 houseboats and the 3 existing cottages on the property, Solstay opened its first season with 13 units.
The first year, as a proof of concept, we ran them. And our first year, we did like 370 grand.
Joe had his answer. People absolutely wanted to sleep on the water. Now, it was time to do it properly. And the next phase meant real investment. Full bathrooms inside each unit, air conditioning, heat, a proper kitchenette, a 4-foot porch, a 4-foot porch, and a picture window right at the head of the bed looking straight out into the lake. 25 by 8-foot structures, all purpose built at around $55,000 each. They added 5 of these Lux units, funded partly by the cash from the first year and partly by a $50,000 grant from the local tourism board, which yes, this is a real thing that you should absolutely be looking into if you're building something that drives tourism in your area. And those 5 Lux units averaged $30,000 a piece in gross revenue in their first year and $37,000 in their second year. Built for $55,000 each, That's a full cost payback in under 2 years. Unbelievable. And with the Lux units added alongside the original 13, Solstay did $565,000 in gross revenue last year. Joe has since added more units, bought neighboring cottages, acquiring properties across the street, and Solstay is now sitting at around 30 total units heading into 2026.
If we hit all the projections with these 30 units, we're gonna do just over $1 million.
I gotta say, Joe's progression and ability to scale the revenue is just so impressive, especially considering he's under 30. Now, the NOI, the net operating income, which is your total revenue minus operating expenses, not including your debt, sits around $460,000 on that $1 million. Debt service comes out to about $10,000 a month, so about $120,000 a year, which means that his pure cash flow that he just puts in his pocket is $340,000. Not bad, especially when you run the numbers the way that a commercial real estate investor would, which at an 8 cap values this property at $5.75 million on the low end. And after talking to Joe, he's working on a few more revenue streams that could really push that valuation closer to $7.25 million. Small reminder here, Joe bought it in November of 2022 for $1 million. So let that sink in for a minute. For a minute. Shut up. So I know you're probably thinking, how does a 29-year-old from Ohio end up owning a $7 million marina? He's not a hospitality veteran, he doesn't come from money, so where does this all even come from? Joe grew up in Ohio and went to Bowling Green State University. And while he was finishing school, he was running a painting business that he'd taken over from a college entrepreneurship program called Student Painters. And pretty quickly, he realized something that many entrepreneurs realize. He was making his bosses a lot of money. So he decided he'd rather just make it for himself. But to keep his overhead as low as possible while he built the business, Joe did something a little unconventional. He went on a government auction site and bought a decommissioned ambulance from the University of Michigan for $3,500.
I turned the whole back into like a living room, bedroom combo. I had like a cooler that was like my fridge because I lived off of like tuna packets and energy drinks, and that was like my wholesome diet for everything, so I was really healthy.
A $3,500 ambulance, ladder rack on the roof, job site to job site, every summer of college, that was home. Not because he had to, but because he was stacking and saving every dollar to roll into the next thing. By his senior year, he finally had enough to try his first real estate flip, where he expected to make about $40,000 to $50,000 in net profit.
We ended up making like 10 grand, but it was still a really fun experience. I learned a lot from that first one, just kind of started catapulting things from there.
Joe's reaction was basically, okay, well, what's next? That mindset ends up becoming the through line for everything he builds. Joe doesn't sit around perfecting idea. He tests them quickly and cheaply, and if they work, he scales. This is what I call rapid prototyping. And a perfect example of that came right after college. He took a trip out west and stayed at a few tent sites outside of the Grand Canyon.
And I was like, shoot, these people are renting these tents for like $180. Why are we not doing this? This is so simple.
So he and a friend did exactly that. They bought an acre of land for about $5,000, and they built the cheapest version of the idea that they possibly could. 2 sheds delivered from Home Depot, 3 deck tent sites, a communal shower house, everything solar powered, everything ordered off of Amazon. To build it, Joe and 3 guys from his painting crew flew out to Arizona, where they shared 1 room at a Motel 6 for 3 weeks, which I'm sure that room smelled fantastic. 3 weeks later, they had a functioning glam site outside of the Grand Canyon. Year 1 revenue, $98,000. On a project that started with a $5,000 piece of land and a few tents. That's Joe's pattern, trying something fast, build the cheapest version and prove that the idea works, and if it does, scale it. That mindset, rapid prototyping, learning fast, and moving forward is exactly what eventually led him to the marina that would become Solstay. So how did he even find this deal to begin with? Joe had briefed his realtor and said, find me a marina or a campground or just something that I can pour a new life into. 3 or 4 months later, his phone rang. The realtor had been selling another client's house, and through that process found out that that client was thinking about letting go of a marina that they owned. It wasn't even a formal listing at this point, just a conversation that ended with a simple question. Hey, do you want to buy a marina? And of course, Joe said yes. Now keep in mind, this is the same property that you saw at the beginning of this video. The floating cottages, the boardwalk, the picture windows over the lake, the $7 million valuation. But what Joe walked into that day looked nothing like that.
This place was very industrial. I mean, if you're familiar with a marina as a whole, this is like an industrial metal building, a old block building, and then old steel docks that were from like 1978. It was rusty, it was old. We're the eyesore. We're like, people across the water are gonna be happy to see us do something with this.
And the price was a bit steep, considering the seller wanted $1 million for a property that was generating about $20,000 a year, which if you've ever tried to get any sort of commercial financing from a bank, you can probably imagine how that conversation went between Joe and his banker. It went something like this. No. So Joe had to do what he'd been doing his entire career. He found another way.
We came across this group called Enhanced Capital. We talked to them. They're like, hey, we'll give you the $1 million if you can put $300,000 aside for improvements to this place.
He pulled together a group of investors who believed in his vision, and he raised the money to buy the property and start improving it. And then he went right back to the strategy that worked for him from the very beginning. Start small, test the idea, then scale. The same rapid prototyping mindset that built a glamp site out of Home Depot sheds was now pointed at an entire marina on Lake Erie. Joe didn't start with a clear plan. He didn't have a mentor handing him a blueprint or a family connection that opened the right door. He started with a $3,500 ambulance, a painting business, and a willingness to try things that had a very real chance of not working out. And that's the whole pattern. And every single lesson that he learned along the way is living inside of Soul Stay right now. And Joe's just getting started. As a matter of fact, he just bought the bar and restaurant right next door with 27 dock slips included.
I've never been in the bar business before though, so this is gonna be, talk about imposter syndrome, man. I have no idea what I'm doing.
And you know what? That's exactly what he said about the marina in 2022, about the glamp site in Arizona, and about every single thing that he's ever built. Yet still, the not knowing has never once stopped him. And if there's one thing I want you to take away from Joe's story, it's this. The people who build remarkable things are rarely the most qualified people in the room. They're just the ones who started before they felt ready, learned faster than everyone else, and refused to let the failures mean more than the lessons inside of them.
At the end of the day, you know, there's two things that could happen. You could stay in like the position that you're in, or you could be in a better position. Usually you're not gonna go into a worse position from trying something. And most often you're gonna end up feeling like you learned something and you grew as a person.
And that right there perfectly sums up Joe's can't lose mindset. I think he might be onto something. And if you're ready to build your dream from the ground up, consider working with me and my team over at Host Camp. In the last 5 years, we have helped thousands of students build their portfolios from the ground up. If you're interested in working hand in hand with me and my team, I'll leave a link in the description down below for you where you can book a free Airbnb strategy session with me and my team, see if we can help you. And if you want to see more stories like Joe's with real investors, real numbers, and no fluff, then you're going to want to click right here. Okay, I got some juicy content lined up for you, but of course, don't forget to like and subscribe first. But once you do that, I'll catch you here. Okay, bye.